Hello, BookTube. A while ago, Michael K. Vaughan did a video about the things that lurk on his Kindle, the books that he downloaded to his Kindle over the period of however long he's had it, and hasn't really looked at. And he had a reason for spelunking down into the depths of his Kindle. That was Criminale, another BookTube channel that you may be familiar with. Criminale recently, a while ago actually, issued a challenge to himself to read 100 of the books he already owns before he buys any more books that are just going to be bought on an impulse and put on a shelf and sit there gathering dust for years. Sometimes for whole house moves, in some cases, in some of your cases. Criminale made that challenge for himself, and it caught on. Booktubers obviously had a nerve struck by that idea, and several have taken it up, including Michael K. Vaughan. That was the reason why he was spelunking in his Kindle, to see what was there that he could maybe read, since he can't buy any books on his book buy. And I saw his video and made a tag out of it. I weaponized it into a tag. None of you is safe from having your innocent videos turned into tags by yours truly. But the What Lurks on My Kindle tag. And hope that you would all do it. Go into your reading device. It doesn't have to be a Kindle, but go into your reading device and find all the stuff that you haven't read. And tell me about it. And tell me about the device while you're at it. I want to know about the tech as well. And recently, Criminale did the son of What Lurks on My Kindle. He returned to his Kindle for more. I figured if he could do it, I could do it. So I'll leave links to all the offending videos down below. But I went back into, I dug into a Kindle app on a different device and just I reversed the order of the uploads, of the downloads, so that I was looking at the earliest stuff first, and I must have spent a good hour just nosing through that. It felt like I was looking at someone else's device. I honestly don't remember downloading a lot of this stuff, which shows that there is some wisdom behind the satanic Criminale challenge. I found a bunch of things that I want to show you, most of which I have not read. So this will be a rare instance, I would assume, in this video where some of you may have read the things that I'm showing you that I have not. I have them. I own them. They're ebooks. I do a lot of reading on my e-readers, so I will read them. The first one is this. It's H.M. Castor. It's a historical novel, YA, I believe, called 8. The throne is his, and he is only 17. And it is, as you might have guessed, Prince Hal. It is Henry VIII. as a young super hottie. Henry VIII was a young super hottie when he came to the throne, but not a 20th century super hottie. He didn't look like our version of a super hottie. He looked like his own era's version of a super hottie. This would have been, this young man would have been largely bewildering as a focus of beauty for the England when Henry VIII came to the throne. The same 8% of the adult population was gay then as is gay now, but nevertheless, most of that 8% would have looked at this and said, well, it's a girl. Right? It's not supposed to attract me, is it? Even if I am attracted to my own gender, it's not supposed to attract me. These things change, aesthetics change. I have this book, and I've had it since it first came out. I don't think I've ever read it. What direction are we going to go in here? We're going to go, all right, towards me. Then this next one is Kim Fielding. This is The Downs. And this is a classic example of a Kindle book. Not just that it's self-published and I encountered it on a Kindle, but that Kindle and other reading apps offer you samples of the book. They try in their own very tight-fisted way to simulate you browsing a book in a bookstore, where you will look at the cover art, you will look at the description, and then typically, if you're walking around a new release table in a bookstore trying to decide whether or not you want to buy something, you'll read a little bit of it. When I worked in bookstores, we had customers that did a lot more than read a little of it. They would take a stack of books they were interested in, go to the nearest comfy chair, sit down and just read all afternoon, to decide, not to steal content, but to legitimately to decide which one they wanted to buy and own. So publishers typically give you a sample of everything. And sometimes self-published authors have learned, I think those of you out there who are self-published authors would be better able to tell me, some of them have learned that they can generate a lot more interest for their books, for paying customers, if they give the books away occasionally. And this is one of those. I think I read this sample, just the first few pages of this book, set in an alternate world, another world where a pampered young prince suddenly finds himself accused of murder and cast out of society, quite literally, because the members of this society cast their worst offenders into a place called the Downs, outside of civilization. The fall alone can kill you, being literally cast down into this place. And it's a wild, vicious wilderness, a subject of bedtime stories to scare children up in the real world. And this formerly pampered prince is thrown down into the Downs and finds an existence there, and even a kind of love. In the first few pages that I read are incredibly gripping, visceral, but gripping. I don't know quite why I didn't finish the book. Typically, I have a rule with those kinds of Kindle or Kobo or Nook samples. If I read your sample, which is usually 6 or 7 pages, if I read your sample and I get to the end of the sample and I very much want to read the next page, you have earned the price of your book. You have earned a purchase from me. That's typically what I do. So I'm not quite sure why I never went back and read the whole thing. I will do that. And any of you who have done that, I would definitely want to know about it. This next one is on my Kindle, but I don't think I've read it. I think I have the paperback copy as well. It's an author I really like. This is The Debutante Is Mine by Vivienne Lorette. Vivienne Lorette is terrific. And I have a whole slew of her books on the shelf behind me here, but I don't know that I've read this one. I read the description. It doesn't strike me as familiar, so I probably haven't. This next one I remember wanting to read. Didn't get around to it. I have the book, but I didn't get around to reading it. This is by R. Cooper, and it's called Taji from Beyond the Rings. It's science fiction about a trade federation that is constantly trying to make connection with a very reserved and isolated species, a proud and isolated species. And this novel features the main character, who is the latest translator on one of those embassies, who becomes more embroiled in that forbidding alien world than he ever imagined possible. And again, like the Downs, maybe a little more fulfilled than he ever imagined. I've talked to a few people who've read this book and who really liked it, but I've never gotten to it. So, okay, this next one is a contemporary cowboy romance. There are quite a few romances I encountered. This is by Shirlene Davies, and it's called Quinn's Honor. I know nothing about it at all. It is McLaren's of Boundary Mountain historical romance. Ranching is his life and in his blood, the only passion he can't live without, until the unwavering love of one woman threatens his belief and changes his heart. Quinn seems a little on the undernourished side on this cover, but I'll take it. I'll definitely take it. Notice I'm hesitating to turn the pages while the screen is facing you, because I'm still not sure if I'm going to do it right. This next one isn't a book. It's a periodical. And on this particular Nook app that I found, there are a slew of these things. I must have subscribed at one point, and they just kept getting automatically delivered, and they're not rescinded. They're still there. So I have an enormous amount of reading to do and rereading to do. It's the New York Times Book Review. I must have subscribed at one point on this particular Nook account. And I just found one after another after another. It looks like they're from 2015, 16, and 17. But thousands of book reviews. I can't wait. I can't wait to dig into these. I'm going to have to parcel them out, or they will command a lot of my time. My time is largely spoken for the next couple of days. But that was a tremendous find, and I would never have done it without searching for what lurks on my Kindle. This is an older thing. This is by Keith Hale. It's a coming-of-age novel called Letters to a Shooting Star. I downloaded this years ago and have never gotten to it. It's a southern gay coming-of-age love story. That I think I remember at the time was billed as being fairly gritty, fairly brutal, perfectly in the wheelhouse of something that I might read and like, but I never got to it. I will. I mean, these are reminders to me to get to these books. Okay, maybe not so much. The next one. This is Lava by Laura Taylor. This is The Elements Book 3. So I would have to find. I must have the first 2 books. I would never get Book 3, even if the cover were hypothetically alluring. This is an Omegaverse novel. Those of you who aren't up on your fiction for the gays will not know that term. It is bewildering. The more you know about it, the more you may wish you didn't know. The Omegaverse is a shared fictional concept in a lot of gay fiction, contemporary gay fiction, in which there is a kind of man who can become pregnant. There are these strapping He-Man alpha males who care about nothing but their own, building their own empire or whatnot. And then there are normal men. And then there are betas, I think they're called, in the Omegaverse, that aren't alpha males and can be impregnated. They can actually give birth. Women exist in the Omegaverse as well, and the Omegaverse is all over the map in terms of the many, many different authors who play around in it. Some of them only use it as a backdrop. They just want to have a committed love story, marriage story, and raising children story without any women at all, without even a woman as a surrogate mother. They just want that. That's the story that they want to tell. Others get into a little bit more of the biology involved, how this would happen, how the Omegaverse would exist. I think we can agree that the basic concept of the Omegaverse is deeply troubling. But I have read a couple of Omegaverse novels that were enjoyable. I've never read anything by Laura Taylor, so I don't think I've read the first 2 books in this series. I've read some that were enjoyable anyway. They had a good deal of spirit, and they stepped wide of the shrieking misogyny of the basic premise of the Omegaverse. But I haven't ever read any Omegaverse novel that was any good. Enjoyable, sure, in a throwaway kind of way. Kind of books that you would never have found in a bookstore. That's one of the joys I always talk about, the proliferation of e-publishing, is that you can read literally anything that your interest goes to. You can find books on that subject by people who get to call themselves authors. Once upon a time, 30 years ago, Laura Taylor would never have found a publisher for this or any of her other books. Maybe Alora's Cave would have come around, a little bit later and published them, but they wouldn't have been widely distributed in bookstores. Now, so much better, such a healthier system. Whether the books were worth it or not, I will give it a try. This next one is by Tracy Barrett, and I may have read this. This is a historical novel, King of Ithaca. And as you can tell, that's not Odysseus. That's Telemachus. That's Odysseus' super hottie teenage son. This is a novel about Telemachus. It's a novel about his search for his father. Very similar in outline, as far as I can tell, to my own novel, The Telemachiad, which is the adventures of super hottie Telemachus. So I may have read this. Once upon a time, I may have got this. Once upon a time, I was the U.S. and worldwide editor for the historical novel review, the Indie Branch. And when that was true, I got books like this in e-copies and in physical copies all the time. I got tons of them every day. I may have read this then, and I may just be blanking on it. The first few chapters will tell me whether or not I did. Then this next one is by Catherine Bone. It is a romance novel. I think it's probably historical, maybe even Regency. I've never read it. I must have bought it at one point or other. It's called Duke by Day, Rogue by Night. And something about the cover appealed to me. Maybe it's the rigging. But I've never read it, and I have it. I might as well read it. This next one is a historical novel along very, very familiar lines. This is by Joan Casey, and it's called Barbarian Soul. And it's the story of a young Roman woman who falls in love with a British barbarian who has been conscripted into gladiatorial combat in the arenas. So right away, even from that thumbnail description, you know 2 things. 1, a million people have written that book. And 2, there's nothing about this that's historically accurate, nothing at all. And even in the brief 1-sentence description that I just gave, there's nothing that would have actually happened. And once again, we have 20th century beauty standards on the cover. I don't begrudge that. Of course, you're making a cover for the 20th century, but that is not what a beautiful young woman would have looked like to most Romans, and that is certainly not what a beautiful young man would have looked like to most Romans. So you just have to roll with that. But it's technically, anyway, Roman historical fiction, and I'm a big fan of Roman historical fiction, so I'll read it, absolutely. This next one is hard science fiction. I don't think I've ever read this. I'm pretty sure I got it from the publisher, but I don't think I ever read it. And I'm now, in addition to somewhere having the ARC and the finished copy from the publisher, I also have the ebook, and that is Arkwright by Alan Steele. This is a science fiction author. A lot of you will probably know better than I do. I don't think I've read more than 1 book by this guy. And it has no strong memory, so I obviously either hate it or love it. But a standalone hard science fiction novel I'll definitely read. And there it was, sitting on the Kindle. It's probably been there for years. And then we'll finish up with this last one. This is book 1 in a series. This is by Regan Uri. And this is Archaic, from the Archaic Saga. And Regan Uri got the same cover designer and illustrator to do all the covers for this book. I think it's up to 6 or 7 books by now, maybe more. This is book 1. It's a very standard Twilight template where an unassuming young girl meets a handsome, mysterious stranger who has a huge secret to hide. He's not a sparkly vampire, but he is, as you can see, he's still sparkly. And if you look at the other archaic books, you see that that Regan Uri made the very wise self-published author decision to splurge on great cover art and to make it all uniform, to enforce the feeling that you are writing books in series. Readers love that. And not all self-published authors have the sense to remember that readers love that. This is a series, that you can just sink your way into. I have not read this first book in the series. If there's anything in it that's worthwhile, then I'll gladly get the others. I do like to support indie authors, so I'll gladly get the others if there's any, but not if it's just by the numbers, then I won't bother. But we'll see. Because that is the last of our books for this What Lurks on My Kindle, the son of What Lurks on My Kindle. We'll have to see. As long as these expeditions of discovery on our deep into the bowels of our e-readers are happening, I'd be happy to keep doing them, because there's a lot more where these came from. But I thought I'd show you these, let you see them. Maybe they're of interest to you, and maybe some of you have read them. The Alan Steele, I think there's a good chance that a lot of you have read him that I have not. And I, of course, would love to hear about that if that's true, so feel free to sing out in the comments or an email. I will be on the fainting couch working hard for the rest of the day. Bright, sunny, calm day here in Boston, literally the calm before the storm. There's a brief, quick, fast-moving, very low impact, but nasty enough looking quasi-winter storm coming here. I think Boston will mostly just get tempestuous rain. But maybe some areas north might get slushy snow. Who knows? But there's definitely a feeling in the air. You go out for little dog walks, and nothing is moving. There's not a hint of movement. There's definitely the feel of a calm before some event of weather. So I've got some e-reading to do, and I will be at my email in case any of you want to tell me if you've read these things and like them. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. I'll try to remember to leave links to everything down below, so that you know how I came down this garden path. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.